Welcome all. We are here today. I am Chef Alex. I'm here to take you on a culinary journey through all of our delights today, and we're going to talk through not only some culinary history, but also I'm going to talk about ingredients. I'm going to identify some stuff for you, and we're ultimately going to end up showing you how to plate these delicious meals. Today we are going to be doing some Irish pub fare. This next coming up holiday really means something to our family. It's not just about knocking them back and having a good time. It's really about a celebration of culture and tradition, and doing that through food is something that I enjoy heavily, but also if I can do it with a little bit of pipe and drum in the background, I'm all ears and I'm very happy about it. But what we're going to do is we're going to be making two dishes today, two very iconic pub fare type dishes. We're going to be making corned beef and cabbage, something I grew up eating. My grandmother would always make it, obviously around this time of year, but also she would just make it because that was part of the repertoire of her dishes. And then we're also going to be making some bangers and mash. But I don't think I'm in the correct attire for this. So if you give me a second. All right. So getting into this, we are going to be working with the corned beef first. The corned beef, even with the braising technique, is going to take around 3 to 4 hours. And in order to do that and get it done with the rest of our meal, we're going to start that first. So we're using corned beef. Now what corned beef is beef brisket that has been corned. Another word for corn is brined. So it has been brined for quite some time. But if you look at it, this is actually a piece of what is known as the flat of the brisket. So it's not the fatty point of the brisket. The flat of the brisket is going to be great, but it's also going to be lean. Cross-section of the brisket itself, right? There's not too much fat that's rendered in there. Now, it's going to be great for this application because we're going to be searing it. The corning process, it can take 7 days, but it can take longer than that. 7 days is probably the median around the portion of time that it would take for most brining applications, especially with wet brine. You can corn a piece of brisket with a dry brine as well, but that's more on, that becomes a different product. It's actually called a Montreal brisket when you do that. But the spices that we're going to be utilizing usually come, if you buy this in a store, you can buy it just like this, corned already. If you buy it corned already, it's going to come with usually a packet of spices. Now, this spice mixture has a bunch of things in it, but a lot of the time you're going to find the main characters here. And that's mustard seed, coriander, bay, chili flake, and then usually a little bit of cardamom, ginger are also in there. So with this spice mixture, we are going to add that after the fact. When you brine or when you corn a piece of beef like this, corning process happens usually with a little bit of nitrates, but also salt, right? You're going to have a lot of sodium in this already. So when I utilize spices in order to really build flavor here, I'm not going to use salt. I am going to use a little bit of cracked black pepper on the top here, okay? And then what we're going to do here is we have a pan heating up. You can use a couple different things. I like to use oil in order to start this dish. You want this pan scorching hot. We're going to get a good sear on this, okay? So that's what we want to hear right there. As this cooks, and as we're getting this nice sear on this meat, the braising process is happening. Now, what braising is a dual cooking process that starts with searing of the products to create a Maillard reaction with this meat. That Maillard reaction is going to caramelize all these outside proteins and sugars, and it's going to provide flavor and color as we cook, okay? If we look around right here, when we hear that sear, we want a decent amount of oil to be there to provide some basis of the sear, but we don't want it pooling, okay? We're not gonna get a good sear if we're pooling fat and oil. We're gonna get a really good sear if we have just a small layer. Once we start to see some brown come up through the sides here, that's when we know we got a decent sear on one side, okay? And we're gonna flip that, and we're gonna start searing the other side. Now again, we're creating both flavor and color here. As we're cooking it and we're getting all these little nice bits on the bottom, the bits are called fondants, and those fondants are going to be flavor. We want to incorporate all that in this dish as we braise it, okay? So as it's searing and it's getting hot and these fondants are caramelizing, we're going to take a little bit of wine. Now the wine and the alcohol, as you pour it into a hot pan, are going to start to release all of those fondants into the actual dish. We're going to add a couple cloves of garlic here, and we're going to deglaze the bottom of this pan, as I said, with some wine, all right? Now you're going to notice as we deglazed, you see all those fondants, they're coming up, and we're going to give them a little help here. All right. Now to this, we're also going to be adding some of that pickling spice. Want some of that complex flavor in there. And then finally we're going to add some stock just to cover up to half of the product. Now what we need to do is we need to let this get to a simmer, and then we're going to cut it off, we're going to cover it, and we are going to get it in the oven. We're going to get it in the oven at 350 degrees for about 2.5 hours. Again, we're looking for a minimum internal cook temperature, whether you do it in the smoker or you do it on the braise, of around 195 to 205. That's where you're going to get a beautiful tender piece of meat. But what we don't want to do with this is get it so much so that is just like shredding apart. Corned beef and cabbage, I want a nice hunk, but I don't want to have any of that connective tissue be present. And that 205 range, 195 to 205 range is when it starts to break down and really tenderize the meat. All right, we're back from the oven. Our corned beef is working, and what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on our cabbage, our carrots, and our potatoes. Now, we're making two kinds of potatoes today. One kind of potato is going to be for our corned beef and cabbage. That's going to be more of a new style potato or a red skinned potato. And then the other style potato we're going to utilize is an Idaho potato, and that's going to be for our mash, for our bangers and mash. Now, the reason why we're using two different kinds of potato is because all potatoes are not the same. Beautiful in its ability and diversification. I mean, you can use potatoes in so many different ways, in so many different applications, but there's a difference between potatoes. You can't use one potato on one application that you can use on the other. And so the difference is a waxy or a mealy potato. Now, Idaho is a mealy potato. Idaho potatoes, russet potatoes, they're going to be the best for things like mashed potatoes, potato croquettes, things of a mashed and or whipped nature. A waxy potato being something like a red skin potato or a new potato. Now the benefit of utilizing this in an application like the corned beef and cabbage is because as we cook this, it's going to retain its shape and texture. It's not just going to break into nothing. And so great for roasting, great for braising like we're going to be doing. But the first thing that we need to do is we need to take these and we need to chop these up. We're just going to quarter them. We're not doing anything crazy here. Quarter these potatoes. And we're not going to put these potatoes in now because by the end, you will have cooked them for 2 hours. They will be a broken apart, mash, right, if you will. But it's going to be overdone. So we're going to wait until it's about 3/4 of the way done cooking, and then we're going to add our potatoes, and we're going to add our cabbage, and we're going to braise that potatoes and cabbage together in the liquid that the corned beef has been cooking in. It's going to add all the flavor. It's going to really bring full force to the dish. Now, you can use green cabbage. There's nothing against using green cabbage. I like to use red cabbage. Number one, it's a beautiful color, and when you braise it and add a little acid, it really brings out that red. Cut out the full cabbage stem here, and then we're going to cut right down the center, and then we're going to make about inch cuts. We want something to look like that. And now to the power of movie magic. Whoa, look at that. So we have some potatoes here that we've already peeled ahead of time. So I have a pot of boiling water over here and I'm going to throw them in. But some people would like to either not waste the time and don't find it to be as unpalatable. But what they'll do is you can take these potatoes and you can give these cuts right here and turn them into like this size. Now, when you cook in a smaller form like this, you're increasing the surface area of the penetrating water. So water will penetrate this product, it'll soften it, right? But when you increase that surface area, you lessen the time that it takes for it to soften all the way to the core of this product. Great, you're lessening time. But what you're also doing is you're adding water. So you can control how much water end up in your final product of mashed potatoes if you cook them whole like this, or even if you roast them whole and then mash and then peel and mash after the fact. I personally am fine with throwing them in a pot just like this and waiting the time until they're fork tender and then pulling them out and mashing them. And then I get to decide how much moisture goes in there by way of butter, by way of cream, by way of cream cheese, or a little bit of farmer's cheese if you want to use something like that to add richness. Completely up to you how you want to do it. It's the same reason why when butter is concerned, we use unsalted butter, is because we want to be the arbiters of our own success and or failure. What that means is we want to make sure that we are the ones adding the correct amount of water, the correct amount of salt, the correct amount of take your pick. And that's how we're going to do our cooking, and that's how we're going to make the best quality products we can. But we'll take these, we'll throw them in this pot of boiling water here. We want these potatoes to be in that water, and we want a good amount of headspace of the water over the potato. As the potatoes are cooking, the water is going to evaporate as it's boiling. Now, if it evaporates too much and you get below that line, you're not going to soften the potato wholly, and then you'll end up with chunky smashed potato versus a nice creamy whipped potato. We're gonna dial back to some of our ingredients for our corned beef and cabbage. So corned beef and cabbage, potatoes, carrots, corned beef, stock. Always better with a little bit of bread to do the dipping. You can make Irish soda bread, something like that. But we're gonna use some carrots here, and our carrots have these tops on them. We like to use as much local, fresh produce as possible. And actually where we're located, I mean, we're Chester County based, but no matter where you are in this general area, I'm sure that you can find a farmer's market or something of the like, and please go out there and be a patron to those folks. Anything we can do to shop local, anything we can do to hoist up the folks in our area. I always like using the carrots at the tops because you're getting a lot of nutrients from the actual carrot itself, but there's also a lot of nutrients in the carrot stems and the carrot greens. You can add them to a morning juice if you want to. You can take the actual leaves themselves, chop it up, make a little pea stew out of it. I'm a huge fan of no waste. You can obviously tell, no waste. But any amount of no waste when it comes to these kinds of products, you definitely want to do it. And like I said, it's good. It has that beautiful carrot flavor. Like I said, though, the leaves tend to be a little bitter. So you can counterbalance that with something, whether it be a little touch of honey or whatever you want. But great products. Utilize all of it. Do as best you can. Okay? But with these, we are going to trim off a fair amount of those greens for this application. Okay? Like I said, utilize these greens any way you want. Pea stew. You can pickle them. You can do, a couple other cool things with them. Okay? And then with all these carrots, wash them very well. And then we're going to take them and we're going to cut them into 3 sections. So we're going to end up with some long pieces here, okay? And if you look at these long pieces, they're going to be great little additions to our dish. As we boil them in the process, like I said, 3/4 of the way through cooking, we're going to add the potatoes, and then 10 minutes after that, we'll add all the carrots. And what's going to happen is those carrots and the cabbage will braise with the rest of it. But if my man could fly in a nice little dram for me, thank you so much. Irish whiskey is a staple of at least our home and our household. I love whiskey in all of its fashions. Love a good bourbon, but Irish whiskey definitely takes me back. My grandfather was a Bushmills man, and so here's a little dram to you. And we'll keep that bad boy right there for some sipping. Now, the next dish that we're going to do is these bangers. Can be made from beef, but traditionally and most majoritatively are made from pork. What makes it more blonde of a sausage than other pork sausages is the addition of rusk. Now, rusk is an interesting name for it, but basically what it turns out to be is an unfermented, ground up cereal product, essentially breadcrumb, right? And breadcrumb was added to this sausage. It was such a large product during World War I and World War II when meat was rationed heavily, right? Everything was rationed, but meat being one of those things that was rationed so much that ultimately it became kind of a delicacy to even get that meat or have that Sunday, roast or whatever it was. And during those times, the rusk was added to actually extend the quantity of the amount of sausages they were getting. It wasn't because, they needed to add something. No, they just needed to make more of them because there was more people and they were, leaving and they needed them to have rations. And what it did is when it cooked, that moisture that was being let off by the meat during the cooking process was being captured by that cereal product, and so it ended up making and retaining its moisture. Now, because it was stuffed into natural casings, it also did another thing. As it cooked, as steam started to accumulate in the actual sausage itself, it would be cooking at a rate, and the steam would be producing at a rate so violently sometimes that it would burst, poof, it would pop, or bang, if you will. Now, there's an old wives' tale that that says that they would give them to soldiers and they would put them in their packs, and it would get so hot out and in the conditions that they would burst in their bag. No, I don't know that that's necessarily correct, but the violent bang and banger ultimately became the name because of the actual cooking process and what would happen in the pan. Now, as we cook these, you might be able to see some of that, but it's not going to be as violent. You're not going to hear a loud sound or anything like that, but you're definitely going to see that as it cooks, it's going to start to crack a little bit. It's going to start to, burst that seam a little bit, and all of those things are great. Oh, and we're back. All right. All right, another little dram. As we get this pan hot, I want to talk to you about cooking fats. Now, in the front here, you'll see that I have a bottle of oil, and I also have a fair bit of butter there. Now, that butter is really there to be added to our mashed potatoes, but obviously, cooking with butter is always delicious. But let's talk about searing proteins. Searing proteins, searing vegetables, searing whatever. Now, when we sear something, the way we get to a sear is a small amount of fat and a high amount of heat. Now, the high amount of heat is going to get that initial sear on there, going to create that Maillard reaction we talked about, going to create that crust on the outside of proteins. It's going to create that color on the outside of vegetables and things of that nature. But in order to do so, heat needs to be real high, And the usage of fat is very interesting when we are cooking with very high heat because all fats have what we know as a smoke point. A smoke point is the temperature whereby which the oil or the fat burns rather than just is hot, okay? Now we're using a blended oil here. That's a little bit of canola oil and a little bit of olive oil. Now the olive oil itself is going to add flavor. The straight vegetable canola oil is typically flavorless, right? But what that does with your blending oil, you're adding flavor and you're getting the hot and that smoke point up to where you need to saute. This pan is really hot and really ready for these bangers. We're going to add, like I said, a little bit of oil. Now, if you notice, smoke point, smoking, right? We're getting pretty hot. We're going to add these in here. And we're going to start to move. Now, the biggest thing when it comes to searing these bangers is, like I said, there is going to be a fair amount of moisture in the actual bangers themselves. So we're going to keep them moving, right? The outside of these casings is going to get fairly browned, and we want that. We want a good golden brown on these casings. We're going to keep moving them around. We're going to give them a little jump. We're going to do a little jumping sausage, which is interesting because the actual term sauté in French means to jump. Crazy, right? Get these in here. Now, when they get to this point, right, if you look at the actual sausage itself, you see all these little pieces, right, of this broken casing itself. That's where that bang comes from, right? That's where that term banger comes from. And so as they cook, they're going to pop. Ooh, give me that sausages. Okay? We're going to get that on there. We're going to continue to sear these, get these nice and cooked up, get this color looking good, right? And with this, in order to get a good amount of flavor in here too, about halfway through the cooking process, we're going to finish with a little bit of butter. And if you look at the bottom, you see all this beautiful flavor that's coming out of the banger itself. Now, again, much like we did with the corned beef, we are going to be making a sauce in this pan, that caramelized onion gravy, okay? Caramelized onion, a little bit of Guinness, a little bit of beef stock. We're going to sweat that down. We're going to get that all nice and thick, and that's going to be the sauce for the top of our banger. A good Guinness gravy is going to go a long way. Now, you could definitely put it on the banger, or you can just eat that shit with a spoon, baby. Get it up. All right, cooking, we're going to get to cutting our onion. We want these onions to be so small that as we cook them, they almost start to evaporate and left with this sweet, sweet onion flavor. And in order to do that, we're going to do a little bit of julienning. Right? Because as we're cutting that, that's what we want to see. Very, very thin julienne, okay? So we have our sausages right here. Sausages, got a little bit of that brown butter in there now. So we're going to start to actually caramelize some of these onions in here. All right. Look at all that goodness right there. Caramelized onions, little bangers. Now, couple different scenarios we can do here in order to create this. Now this is a gravy. You can thicken a gravy a couple different ways. Now you can do a traditional French method known as monter, which means to mount with butter. So basically it's like adding everything in, reducing it, and then adding cold butter in at the end. It just kind of gets that glossiness. Now what that's going to do, it's going to be great, but has a potential to, if it sits for a long point in time, it will break and that butter will start to run out. So we're going to make a gravy, like a more traditional style gravy. So having said that, we're going to add some flour. And we're only going to need a little bit, right? A little bit goes a long way. We're gonna add it right in there. You have those onions in there, they're very thin, they're rendering, they're getting all of that good caramelization. We have the flour in there with our sausage, and now the only thing left to add is a nice creamy fucking pint. And to this, we are also going to be adding beef stock. All right, so as far as potatoes with our mash in the corner here, we want to make sure that we test them. How we test them is we're going to take a fork or a spoon like this and we're going to push it in. Now, if it goes through very easily, boom, we're done. All right, we have a good potato that we can mash. Next we're going to do is we're going to strain this, and then I'll show you how to put it together. While we're getting that strained out, we are going to add a little bit of roughage here to this sauce. I love adding these deep, rich flavors. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of parsley here, and then we are going to get some of this rosemary. That rosemary, we could do one of two things, right? If we don't want the full flavor of rosemary, because rosemary is one of those herbs that can definitely overtake a dish. Now, I love a good rosemary gravy. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to strip half of it. We're going to take the other half with the stem, put that in our sauce. We're going to take the half of it and we're going to bundle it up with our parsley. And we're going to rock through here. And we are going to get this cut up. All right. Now we have our herbaceous additive here. All right, to our potatoes, we are going to add a fair amount, a nice good pinch of salt, a good pinch of pepper. Now we want to get this beautiful creamy richness out of this. So we're going to add a fair bit of butter here. Okay. And you can get a potato masher, but you know what I feel like works just as well? A whisk. Also, you can do this in a KitchenAid mixer if you want, but you're going to let the heat of the potatoes melt that butter. Two things to make the best potatoes: cold butter and warm cream. Warm cream isn't going to seize the potatoes, so if you heat that cream, you're going to get a much richer and smoother whipped potato. As this butter melts, that's what we're looking for, and then we're going to add that warm cream. Look at that beautiful mash. All right, now, all right, you're good. Now, we always want to taste, make sure we have a good amount of salt, okay? Solid. Now, interesting thing with salt, and again, why we use unsalted butter, I want to control the amount of salt that I put in here. When you're adding salt to dishes, salt's one of those things that will enhance flavor, can definitely be over salted, right? You can always add more. Taking it away, can't do, right? So when you're adding salt, add small bits at a time to get you your desired flavor profile. All right, so we are going to get back into cooking these sausages. We want this gravy, as it's reducing, we want it to be what is known as nappe, is going to coat the back of a spoon, and so when you run your finger across the back of that spoon, it's going to leave the indentation without bleeding back in together. That is going to be the thickness that we want this gravy to be. And so as it's reducing here, we're getting these flavors all melded together, and it is getting pretty close to that. I think it's probably the best case for us to now add our cabbage, our carrots, and our potatoes to our corned beef and get that cooking. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then we're about to plate. So this is what we're looking for right here on this reduction of this sauce. If you're noticing, it's going to be beautiful and thick. And if you touch it to the back of there, that's what you're looking for. That's the sauce consistency that we want for this gravy. Once again, we're going to plate with another nip. We're going to take our mashed potatoes and we're going to give a nice portion here in the bottom of our bowl. I'm going to follow that up with a few of these beautiful bangers right here. Boop. 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 All right. And then lastly, I'm going to take that delicious sauce that we've created and we're going to give it a good spoonful over that bad boy. Ooh, yeah. So last thing we want to do is try it out. So let's get in here and we'll get some of that gravy in there. Oh, yeah. That is heaven right there. It's nice, nice. All right. You know what goes great with bangers and mash? The rest of this whiskey. Delicious. All right. So now that we got that dish, we're going to save that. We're going to hand that out to the rest of the folks here. And we are going to get our corned beef and cabbage. All right, so as we round out the cooking time, again, magic of movie time. We are looking at about 3 hours here on our corned beef. We have the cabbage, the carrots, the potatoes all in there, braising with the corned beef in the actual liquid itself. Okay, we're going to take this out. So first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to slice this. The best case scenario, right, after you've braised this is you can hold it up like this, right? And that's kind of what we talked about is we want to have some structure here, but we don't want, right? We don't want it to just fall apart. Now, what we do want, though, is for us to be able to do this, right? We want to be able to break it apart because, like I said, that connective tissue that's in there, and you can see a little bit of that, right? The connective tissue in there starts to break down, like I said, at that 195 degrees. This went all the way to 200. Perfect. It's delicious. It's where we want it to be, okay? So we're going to give it a couple more slices here. And then to our plate, take that delicious cabbage. Going to put it down there, okay? And we're going to take some of these carrots and put them down there. Then we got these nice potatoes right there. And then finally, we're going to take just a good old heap of that corned beef. We're going to put it right on top there. Once again, creamy pint never hurts. All right? So folks, I hope you enjoyed our dishes, our bangers and mash, our corned beef and cabbage, little Coleman's mustard, some whiskey, and a nice pint. Now go out there and enjoy some delicious Irish fare. Have fun with all your friends on St. Paddy's Day, and I wish you all a fantastic and bountiful year. Sláinte.